Okay, so we're going to be talking about legal and regulatory. This is going to be a fireside chat that we're going to have, and it basically is pretty much how law and government may impact startups. So one of the good things is Brian is the augmented legality expert, and I'm here to hold his water. No, I'm actually involved in law enforcement, and one of the things is that there's certain issues that come into play when it comes down to starting a startup in certain pitfalls and some of the experiences that we're going to discuss, and Brian is going to share his expertise with you. I just want to tell you, as an active police officer, I don't represent what comes out of my mouth from my police department, so that's my disclaimer. And
same for me and my law firm and my clients.
Absolutely. But one of the things since we don't have much time and we appreciate you guys being here, is that we wanted to highlight three major takeaways that we're going to discuss in the short period of time that we have here. And the first one is we're going to be talking about disruption and how that it's resisted. So that's takeaway number one. We're going to get into that. The second is going to be privacy, which is another big issue. And the third one is mo money, mo problems, and that's as Brian described it. So we're going to get into that, but why don't we kick off our disruption will be resisted, Brian?
Yeah, so just to clarify, three headers to take away, because we're not using slides. We want this to be more direct talk and interactive. We want to save some questions time for at the very end, maybe 5 minutes or so. And we want you to walk away with these headers in your mind, if you will. First is that disruption will be resisted. In terms of what we're introducing, where we're changing some mindsets, and that's going to get some pushback. You're going to run into that. The second is more money, more problems. Now that AR is finally in VR trying to pick up as an industry, mixed reality is actually gaining traction. It's going to gain the attention of people that will make lives difficult for you as well. And the third is that you're still a startup. 95% of your problems are going to be the same ones that every other startup runs into, AR or not. So when we say disruption will be resisted, I have a couple examples to take away. The first is that odd behavior driven by AR apps will get pushback, will get attentions. And what I mean by that are these mobile games, especially mobile AR games. A couple probably come to mind that drive behavior in ways that people just aren't used to, that regulatory agencies aren't used to, governmental authorities aren't used to. So the first example of this was obviously Ingress from Niantic. Back in 2011, this game was launched. Players of this game are picked up by the police. They ran into questions. They ran into law enforcement because they were acting in ways that were strange, and that was driven by these games. Well, Pokemon Go took that to an order of magnitude higher level. You have people swarming public parks in other public areas in crowd sizes that the government authorities just weren't used to, and they didn't know how to react to this. So where do startups fit into this? Well, I have a particularly interesting legal issue around this very problem right now. The county of Milwaukee adopted an ordinance regulating not the playing of augmented reality games, but their publication, saying you can't even publish an AR game that is playable in our parks without our permission, without a permit. I think that's a big First Amendment problem. I think that the government can't tell you what you can and can't publish. And so on behalf of another startup, an AR company called Candy Lab, which many of you are familiar with, they've been involved in this organization for a long time, we filed a First Amendment lawsuit against the County of Milwaukee. In fact, not 30 minutes ago, for the first time, I got the county's response to our lawsuit. So I've been reading that with great interest today. And would you believe that their argument is, this is what they're going with, okay, that augmented reality games are not speech. They're not protected by the First Amendment. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that one works out for them. Joe, you mentioned privacy, and that's, I think, where disruption happens, and we'll see some things that are unique to AR in response to what you're doing in this space. And that's because, for a few reasons, really. AR eyewear, the kind that you just got done hearing from Microsoft about, HoloLens and just about every other, it has cameras in it because it needs to understand and comprehend its physical surroundings. Well, those cameras get put in people's faces in social circumstances, and you have an invasion of privacy, or at least the perception of it, where you wouldn't have otherwise run into that before. You don't normally have the possibility of someone looking at you and that interaction being recorded. Obviously, video cameras exist, but this form factor is new. So the mixed reality industry is introducing this interaction between people. How the law defines privacy, the invasion of privacy, eavesdropping, all these claims, all these causes of action revolve around the phrase a reasonable expectation of privacy, and what is reasonable for the average person to expect in terms of whether or not their behavior, their actions will be recorded. That is an evolving concept. 40 years ago, it would have been unreasonable to think that you walk into a grocery store and you'd be recorded while you're shopping for groceries. Now you can't walk into a Walmart without 100 cameras pointing at you, and we just accept that as a society. That is something we now consider reasonable. I fully expect that in a generation from now, many of the things that are awkward about Google Glass or Snap Spectacles or HoloLens for that matter will be routine. And we'll just come to grips with the fact that people are wearing cameras on them and that we have them in places that are odd to think of now. That's going to be a bumpy road, and that we'll have litigation define what is and isn't reasonable for us. And the other way that privacy comes up is the number of different ways that you're being tracked. Just this morning, the HTC Vive speaker talked about this universal tracker. You can stick in your shoes, other devices, everything else is tracking not only geolocation, but your gestures, your gaze. All of these things need to be tracked in order to provide you with the best mixed reality experience. Well, all this tracking leads to data that is now kept, that is now potentially discoverable in litigation, that is now discoverable by hackers if it's not adequately secured. All of these things now become problems that you need to think about. Not only that, but who is listening? How many people develop apps on Vuforia? Okay, a number of you here, a number of us across the expo. Have you ever read Vuforia's terms of use? Did you know that they reserve the right to keep a pipeline on your camera views? Your app that you create using Vuforia's SDK provides Vuforia with its own stream of data about how the app is being used, including what the camera's looking at. And Vuforia reserves the right to keep that information. Are you making your customers aware of that? Because their terms of use require you to do so. So these are details that we need to be thinking of, not only what's being recorded, but who's listening. And those are a couple ways that AR apps, AR efforts that you startups are involved in are going to disrupt and run into pushback from people that just aren't used to those types of questions.
I want to back up for a second, because one of probably the most scariest statements that any startup can hear is, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. One of the things, as we were back here at the Augmented Reality event, which was back in 2012, is one of the speakers said out to everybody in the AR world and VR, talking to them, is don't let the government regulate this awesome medium from under us. And that was kind of the main theme. And I think that what we saw, as Brian talked about Ingress and talked about the Pokemon Go madness which took place, because I think it's a fair assessment, because down to a local level in my own town, I think Brian, your town, and everybody here, Pokemon Go really affected the way people reacted to what is going on. People were going on, places, trespassing, and it caused this panic that was taking place. And then what happens is that one of the things that we've tried to do as the attorney and from the law enforcement perspective is that as we kind of go in before having these discussions, we can kind of help avoid, whether it's startups, certain things that people don't think about, because a lot of developers are like, I really want to create really cool things, and they don't really think about the repercussions of what's going on. So one of the things that Pokemon Go did is to create this, I think it's fair to say, a knee-jerk reaction from the Milwaukee County when it came down to trying to dictate, and just so everybody here knows it, if you go to Milwaukee County and you have an augmented reality app, you're supposed to file a permit in that county. And if you don't file a permit in that county and you have to fill it out, and it'll be stuff like having a party with loud noise, having a DJ, having a digital enhanced app or something is like a checkbox. So one of the concerns here is, if you could think about it as a startup, if now you're told that you have to file permits in 9,000 counties in the United States before you can launch your app, how ridiculous that would be, and then to be told. So these are kind of the reasons why we're having these types of discussions, is that if we could kind of allay the fears of some of the things that have taken place here, and that's kind of the whole purpose. So I wanted to kind of circle back on Brian's points here, because actually I had interviewed Brian with Andy from Candy Labs, and I was playing the Braveheart music of Braveheart, Mel Gibson with the sword, and we're standing up for freedom. Because really what that is, on behalf of the augmented reality group, Candy Labs, along with Brian's law firm, has taken a extremely important step in doing that.
And I won't argue with you, but we're on limited time. So I'd love to continue the conversation with you offline, but we want to get you out on time as well. So our second point here: more money, more problems. In other words, there have been things that have been just kind of accepted in the industry that, maybe they're not totally by the book, or that maybe that's just how the industry has behaved. But now that the world is paying attention to augmented reality, that we have to tighten up the ship a little bit. And we see this even in the fact that the Congress held its first hearing on augmented reality. The Senate Committee on Transportation and Commerce last fall held a hearing where DACRI's Brian Mullins spoke, Niantic's John Hankey, and a few others were called in front of Congress to tell them, hey, what is this AR thing that we've all heard about? That too, thanks to Pokemon for getting the public's attention on that. Now, following that, there is a separate group of congressmen, 6 different congressmen and women that have formed what they call the Reality Caucus, an informal group of congresspeople who are interested in AR and VR. And so we're going to see more governmental scrutiny, more attention paid to this industry. Where will that pan out? So first, I think we need to keep our eye on the Federal Trade Commission. The FTC has broad authority to regulate what the law calls unfair or deceptive trade practices. What does that mean? Pretty much anything that the FTC considers to be unfair or deceptive. And it has been very activist in using that authority, and a lot of times in very good ways, but very much filling the gaps between innovation and the law's ability to catch up. We don't have laws that regulate, even today, we don't have much legal guidance on privacy standards, for example, or data security. The Congress can't get its act together to pass a data security law. But what the FTC does is come in and fill the gaps. They say, well, there's no law that says this is illegal, but we're going to determine that these are the regulations, these are the rules, and anything outside of that is an unfair trade practice that we will come in and sue you for. So where might this take place in augmented reality? Well, one, I think, a very important area is advertisements. Even as far back as 2011, if you've been following my blog for that long, you'll know about the Doritos incident, where Doritos had an AR QR base, but it was AR experience to advertise their product. And there's this public interest group that complained to the FTC that this was deceptive. And I won't go into the details, we don't have the time. But the point is, some people are paying attention. Well, the FTC didn't take action. Nowadays, everybody knows what AR is about, and there's actual money being poured into this. See the announcements from Facebook at the F8 conference, right? They're investing heavily in this, and Snap now has launched the ability to have commercial advertising in the Snap app. And so you're going to see actual money being poured into this. People, companies, brands are going to care what the advertising ecosystem looks like in AR, and so therefore they're going to take action to enforce their trademark rights, enforce their brand integrity. And one other area where this might take effect is in accuracy. And this is something I've kept my eye on. we all know, all of you, I'm sure a lot of you do 3D modeling, have some understanding of how hard it is to represent a real physical object in the virtual space. And we've gotten away in the industry with approximations. We'll represent a car or a product, any other kind of object in virtual space, and we'll say, okay, this is a fun educational interaction with that object. But now that we're using VR and AR to make purchasing decisions, we're asking customers, for example, to buy a car based on what they've seen it look like in AR. When we're using it for surgery, construction, manufacturing, product design, all of these things have real economic consequences if the details are wrong. So we're going to see more attention, I think, and in the near term paid towards scrutinizing, well, just how accurate is the representation of this real-life object in our AR and VR platforms. And if it's materially wrong, and that affects either a construction economic decision, a commercial decision, or a purchasing decision, we're going to see people like the FTC or other litigants taking action against that. And then the last would be the idea of product liability or virtual sickness. We understand that interacting with virtual worlds and digital content can make us ill, and we won't go into the details of that. But there are people right now, even at this conference, if you know Shane Pace or his colleague Matthew Price, they're here, and they've been studying this topic for a long time. And what are the boundaries, what are the guidelines going to be on telling people how old you have to be, or how long you should use a device like this, or whether or not an app is something you can actually use all day without making you sick. We're going to be paying attention to this because more and more people, as this industry scales up, are going to be using these devices. We'll see lawsuits coming out of the woodwork in all sorts of ways. We've already seen it in patent litigation in terms of patent trolls shutting down really innovative AR startups, in specifically those that were doing virtual try-on websites where you can try on in front of a webcam and things that like a watch or clothing or glasses, see what that looks like on you. Thanks to patent trolls, we saw a lot of that innovation shut down. That's just one example. There are a raft of other patent lawsuits coming out of the woodwork based on patents that have existed for years, but because these AR companies are now making money with their innovations, we see action being taken. Joe, you also have some thoughts on spear phishing activity, which has been targeting the AR industry.
Well, one of the things that I had noticed probably a few years ago, but through LinkedIn, and one of the things we wanted to talk about was to kind of vet or protect your startups, protect your organizations by truly, number one, vetting who is with your organization. I'm holding a New Jersey lawsuit where there's a person that's suing other New Jersey AR startups because of violation of non-disclosure agreements and allegedly, it's in here. But through the trust that you have is really important. And what we were seeing is that through LinkedIn and Google Plus and some of these other business social networks, is that people were creating profiles of very good-looking guys or very good-looking women and then sending it to leverage and make that connection. So if you could imagine if there's somebody who sends out an attractive picture of a female who says, I work for this company in AR, and she's connected to Brian, myself, and all these other augmented reality people in this space, you're more likely to connect to that person. So my question is would you hand over your Rolodex, and I'm showing my age a little bit, but would you hand over all your business contacts, all of your clients, all of the people that you truly trust, and give it to a stranger that now can leverage that trust and now set you up for spear phishing, scam, or being able to sell those lists? And apparently there's different lists that are being sold now for who even attends events like this, because there's real value in those sort of things. What I found out with another company was they had a phony website taking pictures of a Saudi Arabian prince and taking pictures of stock photo models and putting them online, and they were actually having people pay money, and you could rate your own app, and then they would post it on their website, and they would actually send that money back to India. and it was like a whole big scam that took place, and we uncovered them. They're still on the website, still up and running, but they haven't posted in a few years, so I'm kind of proud of that. But these are the concerns that you want to have to protect your interests, to know who you're talking with, and to really, some of the pitfalls, because I don't know if anybody's ever been deposed in this room, but it's not a really fun thing to do. And it really could be, you could, be destroyed to, because all you need is Google search results or through Google alerts to indicate that you are being sued, your startup's being sued, or there's some sort of scandal or some sort of incident that's involved. It's kryptonite. People are going to stay away, or you're radioactive. So these are kind of the concerns, that we wanted to raise. And as I cannot believe this, but this one fake LinkedIn profile, there's 129 of my friends in the AR space that are connected to this fake woman. And the real woman lives in Budapest, and they scraped off her picture from a Budapest meetup for dog walking or something like that. And I've actually sent messages to all of my friends saying, hey, this person, you're connected to them, they could leverage your contact. Oh, what's the big deal? Or they just ignore it. And I saw this person go from like 5 AR connections to 129. So there's people in this conference that are connected to these people, and you have to kind of wonder what are their motivations and what type of intelligence. And think about it, everybody here, if you have a business, you have competitors, right? And your competitors want to know who you're talking with and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so and that really leads us into our last point, which is that the issues you're going to run into, the same issues you're going to run into as any other kind of startup. So, Joe mentioned this lawsuit that's pending in New Jersey. That's because, these folks didn't put adequate time into writing their paperwork, right? And this is all based on alleged facts. But the point is, this is the type of breakup that happens amongst startups and founders all the time. And if you don't vet the people you get involved with, you're not careful who you get into bed with in a business, and you don't properly document it, you can end up in these types of situations. We mentioned some cybersecurity type of issues that gets into all the ransomware and DDoS attacks that are happening right now. If these can be launched off of hacked video cameras, and they can target things like hotel doors or yachts, which have also all been the subject of ransomware attacks lately. You can bet that you can have a ransomware attack on your HoloLens or any other device, or an attack that violates the integrity of that device and thus ruins the experience for all your users. You have patent protection. Just in the past week, literally, I had a potential client contact me, and in the course of contacting me about patent protection, it came clear that, well, they may have already disclosed to YouTube all of the fun and exciting things that they wanted to patent, and thus already started the clock running on their U.S. protection, and maybe shot themselves in the foot in terms of foreign patent protection. So all these things that any company runs into, the basic legal advice you're going to want to get is applicable to everybody. Now, and we only have a few minutes left. We can talk on these topics and go deeper in any of these topics all day long. That's what we do, but we'd love to get some questions from you if you have any.
It's a perfect opportunity, everyone. I have some questions, but I'll give the floor to the audience members. There's one right there.
There's an emerging smart contracts space happening, and I'm seeing interfacing happen in both VR and AR with that smart contracting world. From your legal perspectives, are you seeing any big security risks that are heightened or exponentially worsened by the legal profession letting smart contracting in, especially with respect to AR?
Explain to me what you mean by smart contracting.
Automating any element and making some sort of element of the legal process reliant upon a digital substrate. And so, it's no longer strictly in the hands of legal professionals. There's some element, just like you talked about all those varying kinds of internet threats.
Sure.
The above could apply to smart contracts.
Sure, and well, there's two sides to that, obviously. The one is that in any startup life, things are going to be hectic, and anything that you can do to streamline your own expenditure of time by not having to review, the small print of every contract that comes through or having to redraft one from scratch. The more you can automate that process, save yourself some time, that's great. So there is definitely a place for that in any startup environment, any corporate environment for that matter. That's not the only example, what falls under that header of smart contracting, of forms and precedents being used, right? And that's what lawyers do. But it's really easy and very tempting to over-rely on those things. And because of some of the unique issues that AR raises as a medium, because of the details that will change from engagement to engagement, you have to be vigilant not to delegate too much of your attention span to that algorithm, or you're going to end up in trouble. Case in point are privacy policies on websites or in apps. It's very common, far too common, distressingly common, for startups to just go online, Google privacy policy, and download the first one that looks good, change the names, if they even remember to change the names, and throw it up on the website. Well, that's a recipe for disaster.
Anyone else?
Yeah, startups that are creating apps for AR or that use images or collect images or sounds of other people who might not be suspecting that they're collecting, are there any special considerations that should be taken into account?
Yeah, so the question...
Repeat that question.
Yeah, question for the recording is AR apps that are capturing voices and sounds and images from people who may not realize are being recorded. And that's more or less a textbook definition of potential eavesdropping or invasion of privacy. So eavesdropping is usually a statute and varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And invasion of privacy is more of a fuzzy kind of common law concept that's applied by judges on a case-to-case basis. But as I alluded to earlier, both are really kind of governed by what is a reasonable expectation of privacy. And sometimes in the eavesdropping context, you're talking about, well, is one person's consent okay, or do you need the consent of all people involved in the conversation? That varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But yes, anytime you're recording others, especially without their knowledge, you are going to risk eavesdropping liability. And so the question is, are you doing it in a public forum, in a place where you have a very strong argument that this is not private, private content that you're recording? Are you encouraging or allowing this to be done in a private setting? I had a piece of litigation that lasted for 10 years, went up and down from the trial court to the Michigan Supreme Court twice before it was resolved, all over whether or not a conversation that was recorded behind the scenes at a concert was eavesdropping or not, and was it a private conversation? Was it not a private conversation? Were the cameras visible? Were the cameras not visible? I won't tell you how much we spent in legal fees litigating that issue over the course of 10 years. We won. We were defending, and it turned out that the court agreed with us it wasn't a private conversation, but it took a whole lot of effort to get there, and that's not the situation you want to be in as a startup defending litigation like that. So you have, in the case of Google Glass, for example, you had warnings in the terms of use that says, don't use it to record X, Y, Z. You have bright flash, bright shiny lights that show you show everybody else around you when you're recording. So that's a strong argument for, if not express consent, or at least implied consent, that for those around you, that if they don't say anything about you recording them, that they're at least consenting to you doing so. That's why you have bright, shiny lights on video cameras. But yeah, the more hidden you make these recordings, the more you encourage them to be in places where one-on-one conversations are happening rather than big open forums like this one. The riskier that gets, and you kind of need individualized legal counsel on those questions.
I have a question, but anyone else have one before I? Yeah, just a comment. I think it's ironic Congress is getting interested in AR when the state of AR on the hardware and the software was largely funded by the government. For crying out loud. Question though, the government and we're seeing more about smart cities and smart buildings. Will we need to sign something to enter a building that's recording all this data? Presumably, a lot of it from us, right, as individuals. Where does that lead us with even the government getting into using data that we're providing?
Well, this kind of talks about the privacy that you just mentioned, but one of the things, just to get back to what you just said, but the government is usually always 7 years behind current technology trends. And that has always been, and I've been involved in cybercrime since 2003, and it's always been playing catch up on these sort of issues. When you talk about, with the Internet of Things and everything being tied together now, these are the type of questions that really have to be fleshed out in forums and these types of discussions, and to really not create a panic, because almost like that Pokemon Go situation where it created this situation in Milwaukee County, is that you'll have people, and that's why I think it was great to have the Senate discussions there. But one of the things that we noticed with the Senate discussions is that there was people that were asking about Google Maps, some of the senators, and all due respect, they're not technology people. So you have to get them up to speed, but we want to prevent this this fear of, we need to ban smart cities, we need to ban these things because they're violating my rights, or potentially, but there are legitimate concerns, privacy concerns. I think a lot of people, there's been a lot of debate in the United States recently over privacy issues of citizens, and what's being captured, how long it's being captured, who's using it, how is it being used, who has access to it. These are really extremely large conversations that are taking place and that are being worked out in courts, in the Supreme Court, and legislators trying to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, and I think your question also gets to the point of whether or not the government requires our permission for some of the information that they record about us or collecting about us. I don't know. Ask the NSA how many restrictions they observe. But yeah, that will continue to be more of a question, I guess, with the amount of time we have left to address it.
I want to just,
it will be a deeper and more involved question as time goes on.
I want to end this right here and right now, but one of the questions somebody had asked me was, is it possible that a person can hack this or hack that? And the answer that I give everybody is anything is possible. And that's one of the, I want to end it on, when it comes down to startups and regulatory issues and that sort of thing, is to understand that the power, that another thing that we're always up against too. So, who ultimately has that data? But we thank you so much for your time. I know you have somewhere to be right now. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. And thanks to Joe and Brian, the very last talk, day one. So thank you. Come back again.
Absolutely.
Come back tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Sure. Thanks for
so much.
sticking around.
Yep.